Good evening, everyone. My name's Malcolm Hackett, and I'm the chair of the board of the community company which owns and operates the 5 Bendigo Bank community bank branches in Nillumbik Shire and surrounds, which are also the sponsors of this webinar series. Welcome to the first Bushfire Resilience webinar of 2023, Pets and Bushfires, What Do We Know? Our presenters, Mel Taylor and Rachel Westcott, each give us their insights regarding pets and bushfires, followed by a panel session and then a Q&A. We'll finish at 9 p.m. Unfortunately, Steve Glassey, who was advertised on the flyer, is unable to be with us tonight. This series of presentations has been organised by Bushfire Resilience Incorporated, an independent, not-for-profit association focused on improving community awareness and preparedness for the threat of bushfire. These webinars have been organised on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. BRI acknowledges the traditional custodians of the many lands from which you join us tonight and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connection to the lands and waters across Australia. Please note, the webinars and the presenters are providing information, not advice. Our intention is to provide general information about risks to property, people and pets, but it's your responsibility to seek advice for your particular situation. This may be a sensitive topic for some people, and suggested support services are shown on the screen. Thank you to our very important sponsors who've helped to fund BRI activities. The Bendigo Bank Community Bank branches, the CFA, the Warrandyte Riverside Market, Davey Pumps, who have been fantastic in their support, Nillumbik Shire Council, Safer Together, Rotary Diamond Creek, and Rotary Eltham. Thank you for registering your interest and for submitting your questions in advance. You will be able to ask questions as we proceed using the Q&A function, but please keep your questions short and to the point. These webinars are being recorded, and everyone who has registered will be sent the link. We'll begin with a presentation from Dr. Mel Taylor of Macquarie University. Thanks, Mel.
Great, thank you so much. Look, thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here. I would also just like to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people on whose lands I'm coming to you tonight from, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. So tonight we're going to talk about pets and bushfires, and I'm glad we've had the care comment at the start of this, because there may be some things here that you find a bit upsetting. I won't go into too much detail, but just be aware and look after yourself if you start feeling a bit unsure about wanting to stay. I just wanted to start again by acknowledging and introducing you to my little clan here on the top left. So this is my dog Ivor, my 3 cats, and my galah, who's a bit of a terrorist, but they all give me quite a lot of joy in my life, and also some concerns when it comes to think about emergencies and what we're going to do. So just a little bit about me. I'll make it nice and brief. And really, I just wanted to say a few things about some of the research and some of the perspectives I've got, I guess. So firstly, I wanted to start off by saying I'm a social scientist. My background is psychology. So I'm really coming at this from the point of view of thinking about people and their behaviour more than about animal welfare and health. So hopefully Rachel, as a veterinarian, can pick up on those sorts of areas, and I can perhaps concentrate on some of the human behaviour around this, which is so important when it comes to planning and preparedness for bushfires. As part of my research, I have been involved with post-bushfire interviews, so talking to people about their experiences of bushfire, whether that's to do with warnings they've received, the decisions they made, that sort of thing. I've done quite a lot of that work, and in fact, the last year I've been doing similar work, but with people who've impacted by the floods in New South Wales and Queensland. So again, different stories, but to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about tonight is really quite agnostic when it comes to the actual hazard itself. So a lot of the planning and preparedness suggestions and information here is stuff that would be useful for not just bushfires, but also for floods, for cyclones, and indeed any kind of emergency that you might have that means you can't get back to your animals. So yeah, these are, I think anything you do here in the preparedness space will be really helpful. I'd also want to mention that I was involved with the 3-year project with the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC on managing animals in disasters, where we were looking at a lot of best practice in the area. And I'm going to use some of the information that we got through that research in my work with the communities in the Blue Mountains and through an organisation called Blue Arc, which is Blue Mountains Animal Ready Community, where we looked at doing what we can to include and encourage the community to plan and prepare for their animals. So this is where I'm going to structure the presentation tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research and what we know from research about people and animals and emergencies and how all these things interact. Then I'm going to talk about hopefully some useful hints and tips and things to think about when it comes to preparing for your animals. And then at the very end, I've got a couple of slides about some of the resources that are available, and I'm sure that can all be shared with you later as well. And the one thing I wanted to pick out on this slide was some of those pictures you can see there on the right-hand side. And I guess one of the key things for me as a psychologist, somebody interested in human decision-making behaviour, is very evident in these pictures, and that is one of emotion. And of course, dealing with emotional people in these sorts of situations is, of course, a terrific challenge for emergency responders, but also for ourselves as decision makers. And I know in this set of webinars, you're going to be hearing from Danielle Claude, I think next week, and she will tell you a lot about this. And I think this presentation will hopefully add to what she's going to say. So it's been acknowledged for quite a while now that animals and in disasters is quite a challenge. And this quote you can see here on the screen is from leaders from the United States in this area. And they've identified that there's no other factor contributing as much to human evacuation failure in disasters that's under the control of emergency managers when a threat is imminent as pet ownership. So I'm going to talk a little bit to start with about where we've got some of this information from. Before I start, I really want to make just a few important points clear at the outset, and you may well be aware of these, but if you're not, I think these are really important things to take away from tonight's presentation. So the first really important thing is, who is responsible? When it comes to animals, you are responsible. If they're your animals, you are the person managing those animals, you are in charge, and they're your responsibility. And they stay your responsibility throughout any bushfire experience you might have. So whether you're in an emergency evacuation centre, whether you're on the road, the animals are your responsibility. The other 2 points here, animals as property and primacy of human life. So the other point I wanted to make here was that the emergency services are tasked with protecting and saving human life. So that's their priority. That doesn't mean they won't care about animals, but it does mean that the priority is on people and protecting them in the first instance. So again, what you can do best for yourself is to be as prepared, as self-reliant as possible, so that you don't have to add to the challenges that the emergency services are facing in bushfire situations. I'll talk a bit more about the human-animal bond, because that's really where some of that emotion comes into play. And the other thing here is that in most of these cases, when we're talking about being prepared with your animals, the key safest behaviour that's being encouraged in all of these situations, bushfires, floods, other sorts of emergencies, is the safe relocation of animals to a safer place. And ideally to do that early. And I'm quite deliberately using the word relocation rather than evacuation here, because ideally the best thing to do is to get out quickly, get out early, and relocate your animals so they're out of the way, they don't get into your decision making, they're not something that's going to delay you leaving or taking a good course of action. So my big message here is be prepared, leave early, and take your animals with you. So onto the research. So a lot of the research we had in this area, especially 10 5 to 10 years ago was really from the United States, and a lot of that was observations that they'd had there about the sorts of things that people were doing in emergencies with their animals. So you can see here we've got a whole selection of different things. I think this was from Hurricane Harvey, and you can see people evacuating with their animals in eskies there. You can see different types of animals. The massive red tortoises there. You've got people in a cohabiting emergency evacuation shelter there, so people with their animals, alongside people without animals inside the shelter, which is unusual in Australia, but it's something that is a little bit more widespread in the US. You've got animals that were left behind. The dogs in the boats there, they were left behind by owners and needed rescuing later. And you've got rescuers and members of the public sort of trying to save animals. So a whole lot of different behaviours we're seeing here in these sorts of events. Now, the big catalyst for change in the United States in terms of preparing and planning for animals and putting that into front and center, I guess, in planning was Hurricane Katrina. And I don't know if you can remember back to that, but a massive hurricane down in New Orleans area. And from the point of view of animals in that event, there were tens of thousands of animals that were left behind that needed to be collected up, relocated, reunited with their owners, and very few actually got reunited. Many animals were killed. There were animals that were sort of chained up, dogs chained up in yards that drowned. There were dogs that left behind. There were people that stayed behind to look after their animals and died as a consequence. So a whole heap of experiences here that brought this to the attention of FEMA and the people in charge there. And not long after that, they passed this Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act, PETS Act, which really meant that the local emergency management sort of organisations needed to include animals in their preparedness planning if they wanted to receive federal funding for emergencies. So that really was a game changer in the US. And indeed, recently, there's been some further improvements in terms of this PAW Act, which is for planning for animal wellness, which is looking at having experts come together to decide on best practice and help implement that as well. So there's lots going on in the United States, and we tend to sort of look that way a bit for our information here. Of course, it's not so long ago, and I'm sure you'll remember this, the 1920 bushfires, the Black Summer bushfires in Australia. And the one thing that got global attention was the impact of those fires on our wildlife in particular. And so, you can see from the slide here, I've got some information about the numbers of wildlife that were believed to be sort of killed as part of those fires. And also you can see here, there's some mention of livestock. So more than 80,000 livestock also perished in those fires. And down at the bottom, on the bottom right there, that's a little bit of information has come from the South Australian government independent review of those bushfires. And you can see there that sort of, I think it's actually obscured on my screen, but I think it's around sort of 67 or so thousand livestock were killed in those fires alone in that total. Now, what's interesting here is we have no idea how many pets died as a consequence of these fires, because no one collects data. So there are no numbers known for that. And of course, that in itself is alarming, because if we don't have the data, we can't sort of make more of a case to ensure that animals are included in the plans. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my research and some of the research that's gone on, I guess, more broadly in Australia as well. Now, one of the things that's been fun for me in the last few years working in this area is I get to talk to people, and they ask me what sort of research I do, and I start talking about animals. And as soon as you talk to people who've got animals or know of people with animals or have got family with animals, their eyes light up. You have the best conversations. It's a fabulous way to engage with people. So a lot of what we've been doing in the Blue Arc work that I mentioned in the Blue Mountains is really using that bond that people have with their animals as a way to engage with them about emergency planning, bushfire planning in this case. So, and we have all sorts of different relationships with animals. So we have, they're our companions, unconditional love, and those sorts of expressions that get used. We have attachments to all sorts of different animals in all sorts of different ways. If you're a sports person, equestrian, you've got a different relationship with your horse, perhaps. And if you're someone who has show animals and you go around, caring about your animals in those sorts of ways. So lots of different relationships with animals. In terms of Australian statistics, again, they fluctuate a little bit, but generally speaking, about 63% of households in Australia have got pets. Now, Now, in COVID, we know that people, more dogs, and in fact, those numbers went up, I think, estimated to around 69% during COVID. And I think subsequently, we've seen those numbers decline a little bit more as people have had to go back to work, as we've had more sort of financial constraints. So these numbers fluctuate, but you can see a large proportion of households in Australia have got animals. And so we really need to be thinking about those animals. Moreover, and most people who have animals consider them part of the family. You know, it's something you choose to do. It's something that, you know, you choose to have animals in your life typically. So, you know, they're around, and you know, as I've said, you've got lots of different sort of bonds with them. And they play an important role in lots of different ways. But if you take dogs, for example, you know, people walk their dogs, they get sort of health benefits from that. They also get out and about on the street, they meet their neighbours, they meet other dog walkers, and there's a whole social connectedness that comes from that as well. And indeed, you know, in terms of equestrian sports, in terms of shows and things like that, there's a whole lot of social aspects that go on with people around their animals. And of course, in addition to that, we have, you know, working animals, we have working dogs, we have service animals, a whole lot of different connections in there with people. So why does this matter? You know, why do we need to plan for our animals? I mean, I'm guessing you don't really need much convincing there, but these are the sorts of things that we find that can occur during disasters, in particular bushfires here. So, you know, having animals has an impact on people's decision making and their behaviour. And the issues here tend to be around sort of safety. So, you know, whether that's the safety of the animals, safety of people, or indeed safety of emergency responders. And that's the angle we're taking with a lot of the research that's gone on to date about the public safety and the responder safety. So when we look at what sort of things people do, you know, some people are unprepared generally. They haven't considered what they're going to do with their animals. And so they're making decisions on the fly in the heat of the moment, you know, when they're quite distracted and struggling to get on with other things. So it gets in the way of the decision making and preparation to actually leave. People risk their lives to save animals, and that's not just their own animals, that's other people's animals. If you know, they see animals in trouble, they'll go in and jump in. And you record the picture earlier of the lady who rescued the koala and the fires that got a lot of media. So those sorts of dangerous acts happen regularly in these sorts of situations. People will fail to evacuate. They'll refuse to evacuate if they can't take their animals with them. Some people will abandon their animals, will leave them behind, either deliberately, you know, just leave them, or won't be able to take them for whatever reason. So what, you know, that has a knock-on effect, because it you know, bears on their mind. They then you know, want to go back and rescue the animals often before it's safe to do so. So they're hurrying to get back. And some people will leave their animals behind because they think they're not going to be away for very long, and you know, and things sort of change. And some people have quite unrealistic ideas about what will happen if they do evacuate with their animals, in terms of being able to just leave them with somebody and go off and do things. And of course, as I've said, you know, you have to stay with your animals and look after them if you take them with you somewhere. And the emergency services get these sorts of ultimatums. You know, you could either, you know, take them, or you could leave me behind. And we get people refusing to be airlifted out and things like that because they can't take animals with them. So in some of the research, we asked people, you know, if you couldn't evacuate with your animals, you know, would you evacuate? And you can see here some of that data. So, you know, 43% said they definitely would not evacuate, and a further 42% said they might not, but they certainly question the need to leave. Now, I'm not suggesting that 85% necessarily would not evacuate, because I think when you're faced with the situation, it might be slightly different. But at the same time, it gives you an indication of how people are feeling about their animals in terms of what they'll do. And some of those at the bottom there, you can see in the red, we've got some quotes from people there, and a number of people said this would be just an impossible decision, you know, and it, of course, it does weigh on people's minds afterwards. You know, and the people at the bottom said they'd already lost a dog in bushfires previously, and the last thing they wanted to do was leave an animal behind now. And of course, that leads us on to after the event as well. So after the event, you know, if you lose your animals, or, you know, if you've lost a pet, yeah, the research has shown that sort of grief can be equated to that of a loss of a sibling, a human sibling. So it has profound effects on people. And after events like fires and when people have lost houses, maybe some people there've been fatalities as well, human fatalities. We find that people who've lost animals can often struggle with what they call disenfranchised grief, which is really just that with everything else, the enormity of everything else, either people don't acknowledge the loss that people have had who've lost animals, or they themselves don't want to stay and talk about it because they feel it's frivolous in comparison with what other people have lost. So that has implications for recovery for people as well. And the picture there, I'm afraid it's a bad photograph that I took, but it's from the Blue Mountains. It's an acknowledgement of the animal losses there, because the local veterinarian who helped a lot with people's animals during the fires there in 2013, he was aware of the impacts it had on people afterwards and how they were sort of mourning the loss of the animals, and nobody really had sort of acknowledged that. And so they went to quite a lot of effort to put up a memorial and have a little service, and it really helped the community bind together afterwards. So in the last bit of the presentation, the next bit of the presentation, I'd just like to talk a bit about how to plan and prepare for your animals, and hopefully give you some pointers, give you some additional things to think about if perhaps you've already sort of considered your animals, and hopefully give you some ideas about what you can do, or what you can where you can go for more information. So again, just quickly back to the Blue Mountains, we did a survey with the local community around animal ownership, what had happened during the fires and their levels of preparedness. So I'm going to use some of that information along the way, just to sort of give you some examples of what people were saying. And the picture there, that gorgeous cat, that's Ollie the Wonder Cat, he was called. He was one of the animals that was caught out in the fires, survived the fires, but with really badly burnt paws. And he was really a bit of a poster boy for pets after the fires there. And he went on to live to a good age. Unfortunately, he's gone now, but he was really our poster cat for our Blue Arc group. So what animals are we considering tonight? So tonight we're going to focus on the household animals. And I know last year you had Kira Thompson and others talk about horses. And horses are not going to be a focus tonight, but of course they're part of the mix. And it's really important that when we think about animals, we think about all the animals, not just the pets in the house necessarily. But we're not going to talk about large numbers of agricultural animals and farming situations, or the captive animals in zoos or shelters, or even in boarding kennels and places like that. And I'm not going to talk about wildlife. I think Rachel might pick up on some of that as well. But the other thing I wanted to mention was, don't forget the livestock. And again, this was something that Kira gave to me, the word livestock. These are the livestock with names. In particular, we have things like, the pet sheep, the pet goat, the pet pig, like you've got in the image here. But the chickens, and what we find in the Blue Mountains was about 25% of people had chickens in their backyards, but hadn't considered what they were going to do with them. So they often got left out of the plans. So I just want to sort of put in a good word for the chickens tonight. So I've got 5 questions I'm going to ask now, and a few kind of questions underneath those, just to perhaps get you thinking about your own situations and what you might be able to do to help prepare. So the first question is, who are you going to take with you? So if you've got to relocate your animals, ideally early, which ones are you going to take with you? How are you going to do this? How complex is your mix of animals? You've seen mine. We've got the cats, the dog, and the galah. Have you got a number of the same types of animal? Have you got sort of, 2, 3, 4 dogs? Have you got a mix? What considerations have you got? Some animals get on well with each other. Some get on well when they've got some space, but if you put them in the same room, or indeed in the same car, it might be slightly different. So can you take your 3 dogs in the car with the cat, for example? What other considerations are there? What do you need to take with you for them? So there's lots of guidance on the sorts of things you might need to consider. In the first instance, you're normally looking at something to contain your animals in, whether that's a crate or a tank or whatever it is, a box even in some cases. So have you got enough of those? Often people with multiple animals, like 3 cats in my case, you might have 1 or 2 cat carriers, but you often use those just to go to the vet. You usually don't take more than 1 animal at a time. So have you got enough carriers? Have you got enough leads, whatever it is you need? So those are a few things just to consider. Where will you go? Now, this is a big one, because ideally, it's best to go to family and friends. I'm sure that comes out in general emergency planning for bushfires. So if you've got family and friends you can go to, that's always a great benefit for you. Are you planning to go to an evacuation centre? Possibly not the best plan, but in the absence of something better, then definitely something you should consider. But what sort of conditions are you going to find when you get there? Evacuation centres, as a colleague of mine said recently, they're not a they're I can't remember what she said now. They're they're not a cruise ship. So they're not somewhere great to go and hang out for very long. They're noisy. There's no privacy. There's a whole lot of other things there. So you need to think about what you're going to find, what you're going to need to take with you, so that you actually manage to have everything you need. Are you going to have to go to more than one place? So it's not unusual for you to have to take the cat to one place and a dog to somewhere else. Maybe you've got family and friends, and the cat will get on with their children or whatever. So you need to think about these other things. So think about how many journeys you're going to need to make, and whether you're going to need to go to more than one place with your animals. How are you going to get there? Again, what sort of transportation requirements have you got? If you've got 4 horses and a 2-horse float, which 2 horses you're going to take first, and why? Is it better to take the ones you can load easily, get them out first, and then come back for the others? Can you do this in a single, can you move your animals in a single trip? What are contingencies are there if you need to do that? So, what will the timing requirement be? If you take one load of animals first, will you be able to get back? Will the roads be closed? Will you be able to get back and actually get those animals? So there's a few things to consider there. How will your animals react? I think Rachel's going to pick up on some of this, so I will just go very quickly here. But how will they act at the time of the bushfire, when you can start smelling the smoke? Perhaps you're getting a bit stressed. The first thing the cat might do is scarper. So it's really good to try and contain your animals as soon as you've got an idea that you might have to leave, because then you can sort of put them to one side, where they're going to be, and you can get them quickly and leave. Behavioral issues, do you have animals that are anxious to start with? Are there ones with medical needs? There's a whole heap of things you could consider there in terms of what their needs might be. Do you need a plan B, or even D, C, D, and E? And again, it's important to think about some of those considerations. So, for example, in the Blue Mountains, we found that around 50% of, or just over 50% of people in the Blue Mountains commute. So they're not at home during the day. So if you have a fire in the day, a lot of people weren't at home. And this quote here is from someone who was on one of the trains trying to get back from Sydney to the Blue Mountains during the fires in 2013. And you can see that she says, we looked at the horror and the amount of smoke outside the train and felt powerless as we shuffled along. And there was a woman on the phone desperately trying to find someone to get her horses in Wimberley to safety. It was heart-wrenching to listen to. And you can imagine the situation here, people panicking around what they're going to do with their animals and other things they're going to have to consider. So what things are you like to have to consider? Not being home, not having 2 vehicles at home. Maybe you've got the kids and they've got friends around as well, so you haven't got the space in the car you thought you had. So what are the likely other considerations you might have to think about? If you can't get home, one of the most important things here, and it's often the case, I think, with planning for bushfires, is have a discussion, talk to your neighbours. Is there someone local who could help you, who's usually at home if you're at work? So have that conversation, talk to people, have a plan, discuss that plan with the household as well as with your neighbours. And then finally, my closing points here, just want to pick up some of those points. So again, your animal, your responsibility. So be aware of that. Identify the risks you have and seek information so you know what you should be doing. Plan for all your animals if you can. Communicate that plan with your household members and with other people like those neighbours, those local people. Practice the plan. Again, I know Rachel's going to pick this one up, but practice. Consider your alternatives. When something looks like it's going to start happening, stay alert, monitor the conditions, keep aware, and ideally get out early and relocate those animals so that you don't have to consider them alongside everything else when you're trying to sort of get out. So I'm going to put this up on the screen very quickly, Matt and Malcolm, just to say, if you're looking for resources, this is one place you can go. Get Ready Animals. It's hosted by New South Wales SES, but it includes bushfire planning too. And there's some videos there. And then RSPCA Australia has some great resources there, as well as wild animal protection for other types of animals. But also check your state primary industries, because they're the people who have responsibility for animals in disasters. So they will have advice for you, your local councils, and of course, response agencies too. So thanks, Malcolm.
Thanks, Mel. Some terrific stuff there for people to think about. And we'll move on to Rachel Westcott, Dr. Rachel Westcott of the South Australian Veterinary Emergency Management Incorporated. She's our final presenter, and then we'll have that panel session, and then finally the Q&A. Thanks, Rachel.
Good. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Yes, as I'm a veterinarian, I lead South Australian Veterinary Emergency Management. My focus tonight is on a little bit of the veterinary things, a little bit of overlap of what Mel, has touched on as well. And all right, so I'm not seeing my heading there, but preparedness is everything. And this starts well before fire season. And now, because we're in that new normal, that new reality of extreme weather events happening more often and worse. So the new reality and the new normal is that preparedness is a year-round activity. And we're looking at the safety of people and animals. And I look at that through a One Health lens, One Health being the concept that acknowledges that the health and well-being of people, animals, and the environment are intricately connected. So we're looking at the safety of you and your dependent others, human and animals. But as Mel touched on, your animal is your responsibility. So you can't expect the fireys to save your animals because the hierarchy of protection is life, property, environment, and that is intended to mean human life. Having said that, animals and livestock can be property, of course, and a farmer can ask for livestock to be protected as an asset over a house or over a hay shed, etc. Those conversations can move in a fairly dynamic way. Wildlife is part of the environment, and so wildlife is on the lowest on the pecking order of priorities. What can you do? Things that you can do as you work through your preparedness, which is happening, especially now in peacetime, in the wintertime. Develop a relationship with your local veterinary service. So that means having good contact quite frequently with your local veterinary service. So take your pets at least annually and preferably every 6 months. And even if that's just to weigh them on the clinic scales. And if you have the ability to do so, purchase food and over-the-counter medications at that clinic. And when you're doing that, take pets with you as a training exercise. And that has the added advantage of overcoming clinic anxiety of animals who don't like going into the vet clinic, because we hear that quite a lot. In my practice, I run a mobile practice and I see a lot of animals who are socially very upset about going into a vet clinic. So regularity and getting them in there as often as you can. So medications are something that can cause some anxiety for animal owners during emergencies. And it's important to remember that these supply of medications by veterinarians is strictly controlled by legislation. And animals that are on long-term medication need more regular visits, and most vets will require repeats of medication animals to be seen 6 monthly and often every 3 months, depending on the individual circumstances and the conditions, the disease, the multiple problems that animals may have. So a good relationship with your local clinic will go a long way to helping manage medication needs and wellbeing in an emergency. So prior to fire season or at any time during the year, discuss the possibility of securing an emergency supply of medication. And that means making sure you have enough repeats. Particularly, a lot of people now use online pharmacies. I have a lot of clients that I write prescriptions for and they use an online pharmacy so that they are able to manage their medication when they run out quite easily, and often it's cheaper as well. So make sure you have enough repeats of a prescription because, as mentioned, vets are we're just not able to hand over medication if you haven't planned ahead. But if you have a good relationship with the local vets, then you're more likely to obtain at least a see-you-through quantity of medication if you genuinely haven't had enough time to make an appointment. And we all know in the busyness and the pressures of 21st century life that sometimes it's just too hard to get in there in a timely way. Things that might affect your access, there will be road closures, and these are for your safety. Falling trees kill people, and we saw that tragically last year in a fire in the southeast of South Australia where a firefighter was killed. So just because the fire front has gone doesn't mean that the fire ground is safe to enter, and it's falling trees that are the biggest thing. Obviously, fires will be happening in areas that are forested and densely timbered. So these are real problems until the arborists and other agencies can get in there and assess what kinds of things need to be dealt with to get owners and landowners back in there. There may be a lot of animals and owners needing help. There could just be the sheer numbers. There will be damage and destruction to infrastructure, including perhaps the veterinary resources and veterinary clinics. And there'll be transport issues with damage to vehicles. You might have your own vehicles damaged or unable to be driven for whatever reason. So all these things need to be factored in, and it's far better to do that, think this well through, well before you're in that position where you have to do something in a hurry, because doing things in a hurry is a recipe for disaster. It is a really good idea to make sure that you can leave early. Your best plan is to leave early. That's not always possible when you're thinking about things at this time of year, but plan to leave early and get out of the way. And the things you will need: collars and leads that fit, that have ID, that won't come off when the animal pulls away. I mean, how many times I've seen animals in my clinic that, make a dash for it and the collar just comes off. So make sure that you've got a harness or a lead or a halty or whatever you use, because animals will be stressed in these kinds of unusual situations. They'll pick up on your anxiety as well. Have a muzzle if there's any chance of being aggressive, because being aggressive is just a byproduct of anxiety and fear. Take your usual food and water, because you might be in a place that you're not used to, and be prepared to be in a place where you're not used to. And the water supply might be quite different and cause tummy upsets, as with food. Make sure your carriers are working well ahead of time, that the catches work, that the latches work, the fasteners are all in good condition. We've talked about medications. Take coats and bedding with familiar scent and for animals who really find comfort in having the familiar scent of their home bedding. You might need a vaccination certificate, have your microchip details. And another thing that's worth considering is keeping a collapsible cage or pen with you in your own to-go kit. We're not going to talk about people's to-go kits tonight, but if you've got a collapsible pen in your car ready to go, your animal will be safe, because there will be aggression, inter-animal aggression in stressed animals, and that will keep them safe, your animal safe, other animals safe, overcome potential insurance issues. So practice putting them in their carriers and pens and trailers and floats from time to time. Just do that routinely, and that way it doesn't become something that's a really that's a big issue, that they'll be fearful when something's going on. So, and we've got chickens. Well, I have chickens, and there's a lot of we've talked about chickens tonight, and the dogs as well. And you'll see in the picture of it at our front door, you also notice there's a galvanised bin filled with water during the summertime, and our mop buckets, which are our ember and ash buckets as well. And Belle the dog, that's actually not her carrier, she has a bigger one, but these are all the sorts of things that are worth doing to keep anxiety and stress and save time. And a few other things that you might like to consider, and you've probably thought about all of these from other information from other webinars, but it's worth mentioning again, because all these things come with the One Health lens, and they all affect your animals and help you look after your animals as well. So keep your vehicles fueled up routinely. Keep a power bank charged up for phones and torches. Have your local emergency app downloaded on your phone. And another important thing to do to remember is it's worth keeping some cash in your wallet, because if power goes down, then there's going to be a lot of issues with paying for things or obtaining goods when you need them. It's a really good idea to have some old-fashioned cash in your wallet as well. Practice your plan and use checklists, and print those checklists in large font, because you might mislay your glasses, and it can be very frustrating if you can't quite read who was supposed to do what. If you don't have a list that's readable. Print your emergency and family contacts. The old-fashioned hard copy might be really, really useful. Be familiar with checking your local weather services. The Bureau of Meteorology, of course, has METI, which has all your local weather conditions, and it's definitely worth doing that. But all this will help keep your animals safe as well. And there's plenty that's, apart from the fire front, there are lots of other things that are dangerous and can put you in danger and your animals in danger, radiant heat being the biggest killer. Of course, smoke inhalation and respiratory injury. We see a lot of respiratory injuries in animals that have not been able to be moved or not been able to be moved quickly enough. For burns, there's really not a great deal of veterinary treatment that owners can do, but cold running water is probably the best thing. That means, of course, that you need to assess your own access to water and pumps and a power supply. If animals have usual medications, keep them on that medication. And if they have pain relief medications for and other conditions, make sure they have that as well. But don't try to treat burns yourself, to treat and debride and bandage and dress. It's really, if roads are closed, and you find that you have been trapped, cold running water, and once you can get a clinician to see your animals, the better. So lots of people have different kinds of animals. We'll talk a little bit later on about the more unusual pets, fish and frogs and reptiles, and think through about what you're going to do if you're going to have a portable habitat that you can take with you. I've heard of one person, I know I spoke to one person doing my research on Eyre Peninsula, where they put their snake in a pillowcase, and no one knew that the snake was in a pillowcase. It wasn't a venomous snake, it was a completely harmless snake. Quite happy to curl up in the pillowcase under her desk at work, and things like that can certainly make a safe way to transport an animal. Relocating, as Mel said, relocating to family and friends is always the best plan, and have that plan and make sure that it's brought up to date every year, that the same people who could take your animals last year can do it this year. But as you'll see in this quotation here, by the time you smell the smoke, you've got 5 to 10 minutes tops. So the waiting until they smell the smoke is really not a good idea, and people have died by leaving things that long. But everything, if you've had, have goldfish or 5 horses, all of this takes time. So it really is important to think of all this through at least 24 hours beforehand, by watching the weather forecasters, knowing that a bad, dangerous day, and it's not necessarily even a catastrophic day, because plenty of bad fires start on high or severe fire danger days. Bear in mind too that pets of any kind may not be accepted into relief centres. So that's for a number of reasons, primarily for human safety and for insurance issues, but bear in mind that they may not be accepted, and so you do need to make other plans. So how to get help? This will depend a little on your local jurisdiction's arrangements, Australia being a federation of many jurisdictions. In South Australia, I lead SAVEM, and we are a formal part of the State Emergency Management Plan. And when SAVEM is activated, there will be clear instructions about how to get veterinary help for animals, particularly if roads are closed and your local clinician can't access your property. So find out ahead of time from your local authorities who will provide help for animals and how to contact them, and how that all fits into the local scheme of things. Once roads are open, the local veterinary services can access you, or you can access them. Have the visit to your local clinician as soon as possible. And once again, your relationship with your local veterinarians will go a long way to having that done effectively and efficiently. A little bit about wildlife. So inevitably, there will be wildlife affected, and access to care for them and care for them may not be quick, because activations for groups like mine, SAVEM, we're a Tier 2 responder. Tier 1 responders are the fireys and the police and the AMBOs and the SES. So once Tier 2 access is obtained, which may take 48 hours, there will be wildlife affected. But for a start, you really shouldn't be on a fire ground. But if you're on your property and you stage to defend, don't try and catch or treat wildlife yourself. These are wild animals, and they can be dangerous, especially if they're stressed or injured. And the other thing is, of course, that capturing wild animals can lead to serious injury and illness to them, can lead to death. So capture myopathy, kidney diseases associated with muscle breakdown, those sorts of things can cause a slow death over weeks for injured wildlife. So it's really, a fire ground is not the place for well-meaning people who are not fire ground trained, because it really can lead to human death. And that is the last thing we want. So people die on fire ground doing things that are well-intentioned, but not well thought through from a dynamic risk assessment point of view. So do not do this. I think Mel had a picture from a still from this video as well. Do not do this. All you're doing is putting yourself at risk, people at risk who may come to rescue you. It's really very foolish to go in without any protective personal clothing, personal PPE or PPC. And what this woman was actually doing there on that fire ground is really beyond me. And the danger to her and the others who were there was extensive and serious, and got a lot of media attention as a hero, but not a hero, very foolish and should not be there. What you can do is accurately note the location, the species and the number of animals, and use that information to pass up to whoever is responsible for the animal response in an emergency. So use a location app. What 3 Words is one that we have used at Savem quite successfully. There are other GPS apps, of course, and other things you can do, but What 3 Words is useful because it is linked to the Emergency Plus app. Emergency services are using What 3 Words fairly routinely now, and pass that information on to the relevant responders. In South Australia, Savem is one of those responders. But never put yourself at risk to save an animal, no matter how hard that may be, because human life is more important. And if you're injured, then nobody's going to win, and everything just may go completely pear-shaped. So this is the Emergency Plus app, and you'll see at the bottom of the screen that comes up on your phone, then the bottom left, there's a What 3 Words location, and if you have a look at that, it's very, very useful. There are 3 words. There's a 3-word code separated by a dot for every 3 metre square on the planet. So it really is an extremely useful app and can give an accurate location very quickly. And I encourage you to have a look at that. So the link is there, and it's also at the end of this slide. It works offline. You don't need phone reception for that. So it's one thing that is really, really useful to have with you. A few other things that's worth thinking about. In the broader picture of things, think about safe paddocks and fire breaks. If that's alongside a boundary fence with a neighbour, your fire break can be double the size. You need to think about sprinklers with pumps and water supply. And vegetation and planting around assets is something that's really worthwhile. There are a number of publications out now with low flammability gardens and plants, and how to suppress a fire front using the kinds of plants that will do that. Think if you're on a rural property, think about the proximity of flammable crops, because things like canola stubble will burn a lot faster than a legume crop, for example. And if there are sheep in canola stubble, it would be a really good idea to move them out of that stubble. If on a bad fire danger day, move them out into a safe paddock, or a paddock planted with leguminous crops like alfalfa. It's a good idea to make a 5-year plan, because all this takes time and money. But talk to your employer and your neighbours and the local fireys. It's a lot of work, but it is, as mentioned at the beginning, this is the new reality of all the things that we have to make as routine as buying groceries and fueling your car, is to make our preparedness just part of our normal life. So the key messages: prevention and preparedness is key for safety, for survival, and for achieving resilience. So that's really through a One Health lens. There's a few links here that will be on the presentation. Talking about road closures in South Australia, we have the tier system. You probably have things similar in other states. The What 3 Words, and the other agency that has some excellent resources is Australian Red Cross. So that's all from me for now, and I'll hand back to Malcolm.
First, can I just appeal to our audience? Could you please encourage your friends and community groups who are living with bushfire risk to register to become subscribers with BRI? They'll be informed when the recordings are available, and they'll also be informed when they're coming up. Please follow our Facebook page and share our posts. And thank you to those groups and individuals around Australia who've shared those posts before this webinar. And can I urge you all to explore our website? you'll find bite-sized segments of each of the previous 15 webinars. You'll find interviews with people that have been through bushfires. There's transcripts, so you can read sections that may not have been clear to you. And there's a search engine, so you can use keywords to find topics you're particularly interested in. And finally, can I ask you to support our fundraising raffle to enable us to continue on the way we are? There are 2 grand prizes, each comprising a Davey firefighting pump and a Bunnings gift voucher, and you'll be emailed these details in a few days, but they are cracking fire pumps, great pressure, really impressive. Now, we'll tease out a couple of these themes with Mel and Rachel, and then we'll move on to questions. We won't spend too much time on the panel because we've had pretty lengthy presentations. But you both mentioned the less common pets, and I was speaking with someone the other day who had goldfish, and there was a lot of problems with evacuating the family and the goldfish. And I believe the goldfish died in the end because the temperatures were so extreme. But what sort of precautions should you take for these less common pets? Rachel, do you want to have a crack at that?
Sure. Well, I guess it's a case of deciding if you're going to take them or leave them. If you're going to take them, then you need to think through a way of transporting safely and maintaining all the conditions that they require, as in aeration and temperature and cleanliness and food. So if you're deciding to take them with you, then if you've got goldfish, for instance, in an aquarium, go and talk to an aquarium shop and find out what kind of equipment they might have that would be portable. And even if you have to have 2 containers or divide them up if possible, that might be a bit tricky. But think it through. Decide if you're going to take them or leave them, and then you have to find a way of doing that safely. And as we keep saying, ahead of time.
Mel, do you have anything to add there?
No, I was just thinking that I noticed one of the attendees mentioned GADMAC, which was the Global Animal Management Disaster Conference we had running the other weekend. And one of the presentations there was actually about evacuating fish. And she was talking about large numbers of fish, but talked about her phrase was respect the slime, which I hopefully, Rachel, this will mean something to you, but about the sort of the protective coating on fish. So they were talking about using sort of sock nets so you didn't sort of disrupt the surface of the fish too much when you were sort of moving them from one thing to another, and having some air space and aeration around to protect them.
Fish are one of the most challenging.
Yeah.
That's good advice, I guess, for all of those less common pets, is talk to people who know about those pets and find out how to move them.
And the containers are the key thing, I think, often, because you have different animals and different sort of needs. So thinking about what you can move them in and having something available is good, and enough of it.
Now, it seems to me that one of the hardest challenges is how do you make those decisions about what pets you're going to leave behind or what animals you're going to leave behind, particularly for people who have many animals. Do you have any and this, of course, isn't just a practical question, it's a deeply psychological and emotional one. Mel, do you want to kick that off? How do you make that decision?
Oh, look, it's always easy to say, and Rachel brought it up too, in an ideal situation, you want to bring all your animals and take them all to safety. And that would absolutely be the kind of the number one. But there are things you can do, I think, to help give them the best chance. I'm not always sure about what sort of advice there should be there, but a bit low to give that. But I do think, there's safer places to put them within the house if you need to do that. I'm not sure about chickens, whether it's better to let them out or to keep them together, but I've heard different theories from different people about that. I think with some of the outdoor animals, I've heard people, bring those up towards the house, because often the home is fairly well protected, or it has sort of, often doesn't have as much planting around it if people have actually done their prep. So it's at least a little bit safer there, or the safe paddocks that Rachel mentioned. But the sort of stories I've heard have been ones where people were about to leave thinking they were taking the cat and the dog, and then suddenly the kids pipe up, what about the goldfish, or what about the chickens? And that's where I've talked to people, and they said, we weren't planning to take the chickens, but the kids were upset, so we just sort of, we grabbed the box from under the stairs that had the wetsuits in it, we chucked those out, we put the chickens in there and made some holes in the top, we stuck them in the back of the car and we went, and that sort of stuff. So there's a fair bit of creativity going on sort of last minute. But I mean, my thought about the goldfish in some ways would be, if you're talking about a kid's goldfish, then take the goldfish with you in the best way you can. And if the goldfish doesn't make it, you can at least tell the kids that you tried, And I know that sounds a bit sort of morally odd, but it's easy to beat yourself up so much afterwards about what you should have done or what you could have done. And so, I guess I think of that as well.
Rachel, do you want to add anything?
I think it's, if you have a dozen pet animal, large love stock, as we call them, it's going to be very hard to move them. And it's the reality is summer's bad from go to woe, and you can't move your animals every week to somewhere it's safer, really sensibly. So there are going to be, you might take your best show jumper, or your favourite donkey, or the kid's pet dog. You might say, yes, we're going to take animals 1, 2, and 3, and then animals 4 to 12 might have to stay. So it's really a case of, if there are going to be some that are going to stay, think through very, very carefully about where they're going, how you can provide for them, and that's bringing them up to yards with sprinklers, with an independent water supply and pump. Is one really good way of looking after them. So think about where they're going to go, not down the back paddock next to the national park. Bring them up, and yards with an independent water supply and sprinklers is one way that's really worth doing. Plant that, irrigate it if you can with alfalfa or something green, and give them the best chance of being able to. It's still going to be smoke. There still may be respiratory injury, but they might be less likely to get burned.
And those examples you gave, Mel, of kids and their animals they want to take with them, it just highlights the importance of the family making the plan together and talking through even the difficult decisions together. So that means that everyone's on the same page. Yeah.
And often, you can give the kids something to do, during that sort of rather busy period of actually sort of taking care of the animals. Put the animals in the back bedroom and get the kids to stay with the animals to look after them. Keeps everything out of the way while you get on with making your preparations.
Yeah, I think we should move on, because I'm pretty sure we've got a pair of questions that. What's the best action for goats? Usually they're in a well-grazed area surrounded by an electric fence. They jump 1.2 metres with ease. They
do. Yes, I've owned goats. I don't currently have goats, but I do know what they can do. And it depends how many you have. I mean, we only had 2. So we had a portable pen on wheels that we could put them in that had a mesh roof so they couldn't jump out. And put that in a safe paddock. But if you've got several, once again, you may need to, over time, have a fenced area. Where our orchard has a 1.5 metre fence that animals can go in, that's irrigated, and they'll be unlikely to jump out of. So it really is. These things are expensive and they don't happen overnight, but this is the importance of thinking about things that you might need to give your property up for over the next 2, 3, 5 years.
You have to leave the sheep behind. Is it best to just open all gates within the property? They are ear tagged.
I think opening internal gates is fine. Please never, ever open external gates onto roadways. Some people still think that that is an okay thing to do. But as most people would know on this forum, smoke means that you have very poor visibility and you end up with a horse on the front of a fire truck, and that doesn't help anybody. So opening internal gates is very good. Some of the people I spoke to when I was doing my research on Eyre Peninsula made sure that they moved their livestock and their horses from paddock to paddock routinely, so that the animals knew where their way around all the paddocks and knew where the dams were and the gates were and all those sorts of things. So yeah, let them get used to your whole property.
And here's an interesting one. How can we get our cat inside and into a carrier?
I think, Rachel, you made a good point earlier, I think, on that front about getting used to it in a time when it doesn't involve sort of something negative happening at the end of it. So, whether it's creating your dog or whether it's putting a cat in a carrier, try and leave the carrier. I mean, I leave my carriers out so the cats get used to going in them and actually like to sleep in them with the doors off, because then it's not quite so hard to get them in afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely, Mel. That's terrific, and that's absolutely correct. Feed them in the carrier. I know, the common joke is, dogs have cats have staff. Dogs have owners and cats have staff, or something like that. But remember that you are the boss. You are in charge. The cat doesn't call the shots. You do, and cats should be inside at night anyway. Whatever your local council regulations are, they shouldn't be outside at night, so they should be inside at night. And yeah, use that time as advantage for training and feed them in the carriers. It might take some while. It takes patience and it takes kindness and it takes a bit of coercion and love, but they can be trained to do that. Worst case scenario, use the scruff on the back of the neck, because that's nature's handle where Mum was carting the kittens around by the scruff. And going in the carrier bottom first is the quickest and easiest way if you absolutely have to do something in a hurry, but there's no substitute for good training over time.
I think if you've contained them in the bedroom, that helps as well, doesn't it? Because they can't sort of scarper too far.
I think that's really important. We lost a dog in the 2009 fires because I couldn't find him inside the house when it was filling with smoke, and I looked and looked and looked, to no result. Should have had him on a lead and tied inside the house, I think. Thought it would be all right roaming around. Also with that thing on cats, I have had some success in wrapping them in a towel if they've never been in a cage before, so that they're not scratching me when I'm putting them in. What's the effect of smoky air on pet health? If we leave early but the air is smoky, should we delay our return, and for how long? Where can we get information concerning air quality?
Well, I mean, smoke does settle reasonably quickly, but as a fire front is, and it depends too on the wind direction, of course, but as the fire front goes through, the smoke is hot, and if animals are breathing a lot of smoke, then there's very likely to have respiratory injury. That's treatable, but it can be severe. So it does need veterinary assessment promptly. Usually fluids and antibiotics and pain relief, it's effectively a burn of the mucous membranes internally. So particulate matter in the air is probably less of a problem once visibility is back to normal. But if an animal is in a safe paddock and a fire front goes through and there's a lot of smoke, then it does need veterinary attention very, very promptly. So once again, your ag department, the veterinarians from primary industries and ag departments will be tier 2 responders, and they'll be in as soon as the control agency, which are the fireys, will let them in. they can do assessments of animals, and whoever else from the veterinary response agencies would be able to do that for you as well. And once roads are open, taking animals to your regular clinician as soon as you can.
Well, this next question relates directly to that. If a property has a registered PIC number, that's a property identification number, will the property be checked by rangers and authorities after an event of fire for injured livestock if the residents are unable to get back to their properties?
Not without a request. You would have to request. There's always a hotline. Primary Industries in South Australia has the bushfire hotline, which is open all the time. And that hotline, if you leave and you have livestock left behind, then a call to that hotline that will be registered, and the assessment teams will go to that property and assess those animals. But you would have to phone the hotline.
Back to the animals again. What's the biggest threats to a dog's survival in a bushfire situation? Smoke inhalation, heat, stress, etc. What items should I include in my dog's survival kit? Is there a specially designed mask that I could put on my dog to help cope with smoke?
I think all of the above, and plenty of wet towels is always a good thing. These days, people are very used to wearing P2 masks, so make sure you have your P2 masks in your to-go kit, because they will be very helpful with particulate matter for people. I'm not aware of any similar products for dogs or other animals, and so getting them out is the best you can do. Humidifying the air once you can with some misting is always a good idea. And once again, getting them assessed. If they have been exposed to a lot of smoke, then getting them assessed as soon as possible, because they may need treatment. Other things, I mean, we've talked about the things to take with you. I guess we keep coming back to this same key message that preparedness is everything, and preparedness is king. Decide what you're going to do, and don't try very, very hard not to be in that position where you're doing things at the last minute, because inevitably that's a recipe for disaster.
Can I ask a quick question of Rachel that kind of follows on from that? Are there dangers for animals once you get back? If a fire's gone past, maybe it hasn't impacted your property too greatly. Are there other dangers there for things like dogs that people should be aware of?
You mean if the property is safe but animals have been outside?
Or if they're roaming around, maybe.
Yeah, I think if there's burnt ground, obviously burns to extremities and paws are potentially, but if there's no burned ground, then really observing. I mean, everyone knows their own animals very well, so you pick up on things that are not normal, and the things that the subtle changes you pick up on very, very quickly. So if you think that things aren't quite right, then chances are they probably aren't quite right. So yeah, get them checked out. And vet practices get very, very busy in these kinds of events. And my team, we have vets, we have teams of people out door knocking, going from house to house, and responding to calls when things like this happen. And you can get easily have teams on a fire ground for 20 hours a day. But the local clinics will do all they can to see extra people and give animals check-ups. So once roads are open, getting them to the local clinic as soon as you can is a good idea. Plenty of animals, if the wind's been in your favour and your property's not burned, then chances are they are going to be fine if a bit stressed.
It sounds like an entrepreneurial opportunity there for the dog mask person. What recommendations would you make for commercial boarding kennels in a bushfire-prone area? And secondly, what are your recommendations for horses?
Once again, they need to have their own business bushfire survival plan up to date, practiced, and able to be put into action when necessary. Can be really challenging. I have personally had experience in the Samson Flat bushfire of 2015, where a boarding kennel was burned out, and it was absolutely horrific. It is those premises need to have their own bushfire survival plan in place. it's probably a good idea to inform clients about what they would do and where they would take animals and what would happen. And in the Samson Flat fire, evacuation of the kennels, where dogs outside the fire station tied up the fence posts, but a lot of them were okay. Plenty weren't, but a lot were. So it comes down to having that plan, and try and if you're going away in the summertime, and your animals are going into boarding, it might be best to choose a facility that's not in the fire danger area.
Yeah, there are a few grey areas here, aren't there? Because the handing your animal over to somebody else, there's quite a lot of blame and other issues go on afterwards around that, and adjustments and things like that, especially those informal ones, can be messy. If something goes wrong as well. So, yeah, I think you want as an owner, you want to make sure you've done your own homework, I guess, to ensure that you know what would happen if there were to be a fire somewhere, if it looks like it's prone for that sort of thing. And for evacuation of horses, for example, on adjustments, you might want to make sure that you know what the plan is and who's around, or if you're expected to get there, quickly to get your animal as well, because that's often in the plans, I think.
Certainly, we know from the horses webinar that in some cases the adjustment people expect people to come, and in other cases that's the last thing they want. So you need to know what's expected of you. Here's a difficult question, and I suspect it applies to quite a few people. Where can you go with 4 horses, 2 mini ponies, where fencing can be an issue, a dog, 4 cats, and 2 people for potentially multiple days? There are no places of last resort nearby. I have no family or friends in safe areas that I could stay with, given the animals we have to look after.
Yeah, I mean, I know the horse owning fraternity, you sort of talk a lot about buddy systems. I mean, I know that doesn't sort of is an instant fix for this person who's asked the question, but finding people who've got similar situations, who perhaps I know in the Hawkesbury area out to the northwest, we have a lot of flooding there, so we tend to talk about people who are in the floodplain buddying up with people who are in the fire zones outside, because your chances of one being affected whilst the other is affected is unlikely, but you've both got skin in the game. So finding networks of people to try and place some of those animals is helpful. Yeah, I mean, the last thing the emergency services want in these situations is for a lot of helpers to come in, like the horse floats with the adjustments we were just talking about. They don't want those people sort of heading into danger at the time when they want everybody to be evacuating. So again, you've got to make whatever plans you can, I think, ahead of time, as best you can.
Rachel, any?
Yeah, look, same old message: prepare, prepare, prepare. I've talked to a number of people in a similar situation, and I'm very sympathetic. But you do have to try and find a way. I mean, as mentioned, your animals, your responsibility. You do need to find a way to either, to keep them safe, either on the property or move which ones you can. But look, this person is no orphan. There are a number of people in a similar situation where they feel as though it's just too hard and it's hopeless trying to move animals or take them somewhere else or get help. But they get a huge amount of comfort from having their animals, and they have a wonderful relationship with their animals, and that's incredibly important. So I think, really, if you can, safe paddocks, the kind of infrastructure, talk to the local fire agencies and the community engagement officers, because they may be able to put you in touch with people who can help. So communication is under preparedness. I'd put communication as the next thing as the important thing on the list. So yeah, go and talk to the fireys who will. Their community engagement people are very, very skilled at helping people in those situations.
And I think that there have been attempts, haven't there, in some areas to have databases of people willing to sort of take animals. And I know that's it can be a bit tricky, but I recall Jenna Sparkle having something like this in Victoria for a while, and the Bushfire Foundation trying to sort of get something similar up. The challenges are always getting people to volunteer to do these things ahead of time when there's an opportunity to sort of have that contact with people and actually, I was going to say vet them, you know what I mean by this, but check them out beforehand to make sure that, you know, they're sort of people you want having you know, possession of your animals for you for a while. But these things do pop up quite spontaneously at the time, but that's obviously not ideal in terms of the context of what we're trying to do here, which is, you know, get that preparedness ahead of time. But there may be some opportunities perhaps through you know, some of those approaches.
I think in South Australia too, Horse SA has a pretty good network of looking after horses and putting horse people in touch with horse people. So there may be something similar in other states. There's a new horse evacuation centre that Horse SA has funding for near Murray Bridge as part of the Murray Bridge Racehorse Complex. There are yards being built there that horses can be taken to. So, you know, I think the local horse groups are really good at helping out in that sort of respect, and the fire agencies.
We've got a question here about from a person who has 2 small parrots in an outside aviary, and they're interested to learn what's necessary as a prevention preparation rather and actions before a bad fire risk day outside aviary. You've mentioned sprinklers. I guess that's one of the things, but what else can you do with an outside aviary?
Well, it depends on how large it is, I guess, too. But yes, sprinklers, misters, shade cloths. You know, all of the birds are very sensitive to heat and smoke. Their respiratory surfaces are very, very delicate and can be very easily damaged. At the Kangaroo Island fire, when I was there in 2020, near the Southern Ocean Lodge, the huge resort that was burned out, there was one area up near the staff quarters that hadn't been burned, but the ground was littered with dead birds because they just fell out of the sky because of the heat. So they are very, very sensitive to that. And it really is a case of cooling, humidifying, shading as much as you can. And once again, it comes down to ensuring you have an independent, powered and adequate water supply.
Now, you touched on this before, but is it wise to just open chicken runs so the animals can look for their own shelter, or is it better to leave them locked up? And for example, 10 chickens that are used to being free range, to leave early with that number of chickens and find accommodation would probably be difficult. So they're most likely going to stay at home.
Yeah, look, you know, you hear of all sorts of stories about animals that go and do find their known places of refuge and are safe. So if they're familiar with the property, then, you know, and you'd have to make that decision on, you know, on leaving versus taking, and the stresses involved on the people and animals involved in doing that. If there's a dam or a pond or a water supply and they're used to free ranging, you know, there's probably a reasonable chance that some of them would be okay. But it depends on what sort of facilities they're in. If they're in a run that's where you can put sprinklers on that's bare, that might be safer than letting them out. But you know, people know their own animals best, and they know their own animals well.
Yeah, I've certainly spoken to people who've been through terrible fires and, you know, have lost chickens, but then have had, you know, a couple just turn up and they've got no idea how they managed to survive, but they did.
Exactly.
And people have all sorts of theories for what sense animals may or may not have about the right things to do. I've talked to certainly people with horses who reckon that their horses knew where to go and what to do, and others who had animals that clearly didn't have a clue. And yeah, so I don't know what the general thoughts are about whether animals really do have an instinct for the right thing to do in these situations, but certainly some survive.
A final question you've already touched on, but it's, do evacuation centres allow pets? I think you've said some do, some don't. I guess the thing to do there is find out what your local council, what your evacuation centre rules are in advance. But I'm assuming.
Yeah, generally in this state, relief centres don't take animals, but it is the responsibility of primary industries to find places for animals. So in the last, our last response, which was the River Murray flood response, We had a whole lot of portable cages that were based at Primary Industries headquarters in Adelaide, and we had other kennels and boarding facilities out of the flood area lined up with places to take animals. So that, you know, there are plans in place to do that. So, but it does vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Generally, though, expect that relief centres won't take animals, and that's for good reasons, because you know, dog bites and children going to pat a dog that's stressed that bites it and all those sorts of things. You know, those practical things have to be considered. But so yeah, so find out, do your homework, find out what your local authorities, councils, RSPCA, primary industries departments, what their plans are. A lot of that information is on their websites, but certainly talking face to face with people sometimes is a good idea too.
Yeah, I think New South Wales, I mean, I think things have are changing all the time, and I suspect after the Black Summer fires and now the floods in New South Wales, there's a lot of improvements that weren't there sort of, you know, 5-10 years ago. But I think typically make the assumption that they won't take animals. I mean, with in the past, it's always been the case with human evacuation centres in New South Wales that the requirement to house animals only happens once the human evacuation centres open. So that was always a bit of an issue when it came to try and leave early with animals, because there was nowhere to take them, because they weren't triggered until the humans were turning up with animals at the human evacuation centres. And also there's a reluctance often to give the location of some of these evacuation centres ahead of time, especially in places like the Blue Mountains, where there's one road in, one road out. So, you know, depending where the fire's coming from, you don't want people to, you know, heading to the place that they think the evacuation centre is going to be, if that's actually in the line of fire. So there are some issues there. Also, I think, you know, that there's more local work going on with holding areas for larger animals. So, you know, in my area in northwest of Sydney, you know, we have the you know, Castle Hill will open up and have places you can take your larger animals to, but you have to stay with them, you know, and that's the issue. So if you're staying with your animals to look after them, that means, you know, maybe if you're a couple and you've got kids as well, that means the other partner is having to take the kids to the human evacuation centre where they're getting the food and the information, but you're not being fed because you're with the animals in the animal area. So there's a whole heap of kind of issues there that that go on, which can be make it more complex too if you've got to stay with your animals.
Main thing is do your research by the sounds of it. Look, thank you both, Mel and Rachel, for really informative and challenging presentations, and I'm sure your responses, particularly on personal responsibility, will motivate many in our audience to reassess their plans for preparing and managing their pets in the face of a threat from bushfire. Following tonight's webinar, everyone will receive a confidential feedback survey. Your comments will help other people, but they'll certainly help BRI to continue to improve. I'd like to acknowledge Max Gardner, Mark Ravel, John Huff, Alan Bloom, Peter Milton Hall, Lisa O'Brien, Max Coleman, Rob Reed-Smith, Jason McFadden and Tammy Garrett for their commitment in conducting the webinar series and maintaining a very informative website. And special thanks to Rowan Thornton, our Zoom host, for his technical assistance and his advice. Thank you also to Riley Watson and Kathy Overton for their help. Our next webinar on Wednesday, the 16th of August at 7:30 will be titled Getting Ready for an El Nino Summer, with presenters Craig Lapsley, Parvathy Subramaniam and Danielle Claude. We hope to see you then. Thank you and good night.